The chamber stretched across 5 kilometers of pure crystal. Its walls rose so high that clouds formed near the ceiling, drifting between pillars of light that marked each of the 900 civilizations represented within. At the center of this impossible space, floating platforms held delegates from every corner of the known universe. Some were made of light. Others were clouds of gas contained in magnetic fields. A few were so ancient that they had forgotten what physical form even meant, and standing alone on the floor of this chamber, surrounded by 20,000 alien eyes, was a single human woman. Admiral Rebecca Cole stood perfectly still. She was 57 years old, with gray hair cut short and a uniform that looked almost laughably simple compared to the crystalline robes and energy fields worn by the beings watching her. Her hands were clasped behind her back. Her face showed nothing, but her heart was pounding. The Supreme Arbiter spoke first. It was a being called Thanos, a creature of pure mathematics given physical form. When it spoke, reality itself seemed to bend around its words. Human representative, you have been summoned to answer for crimes against galactic law. Your species has deployed military vessels into 512 sovereign star systems. You have violated treaties older than your sun. You have ignored 9,000 diplomatic warnings. The Arbiter paused. This council demands an explanation. Failure to provide one will result in the immediate authorization of extinction protocols. The chamber fell silent. 20,000 delegates held their breath. Rebecca Cole looked up at the Arbiter. She looked at the gathered representatives of civilizations that had existed for millions of years. She looked at beings who could destroy Earth with a thought, and then she spoke. 71 hours ago, Earth received a transmission. She pressed a button on her wrist device. The ceiling of the chamber flickered, and suddenly a voice filled the space. It was small, desperate, and terrified. Please, if anyone can hear this, they are killing us. The Devourers have found us. There are 9 billion of us, and we have no weapons. Please, someone help us. Anyone. The message played twice, then fell silent. Rebecca watched the chamber. She saw something she had not expected. She saw fear. That signal came from the Vorathi homeworld, she said. A species your records claim went extinct 4,000 years ago. But they are not extinct. They have been hiding. And 3 days ago, something found them. The chamber erupted. Delegates screamed at each other in languages that had no human translation. Platforms shook. Energy fields crackled with anger and terror. The Arbiter raised one geometric limb, and silence returned. The Vorathi extinction was a natural event, it said. Documented and verified. The Vorathi extinction was a lie. Rebecca pulled up new data on the display. Your council has been hiding them, keeping them isolated, using them as a buffer between your civilizations and something you call the Devourers. Something you have never told anyone about. Something that has been hunting this galaxy for 100,000 years. Now the fear was visible. Ancient species shifted uncomfortably. Delegates who had existed since the first stars formed looked away from her gaze. You knew, Rebecca continued. All of you. You knew there was something out there consuming entire civilizations. And your strategy was simple. Feed it the weak. Protect the strong. Let the small species die so the large ones could survive. She stepped forward, and her voice hardened. Humanity received that signal, and we did something none of you have ever done. We answered it. The display changed to show tactical data. 512 star systems. In each one, human warships had appeared in less than 3 days. Vessels that moved faster than anything in the galactic database. Weapons that the Council had never seen before. We saved 7 billion Vorathi lives, Rebecca said. We destroyed 3 Devourer vessels. And now we are positioned across your galaxy, ready to fight an enemy you have been running from for 100 millennia. The Arbiter processed this information for 7 full seconds. When it spoke again, its voice was different. Smaller, somehow. You have no authority to conduct military operations in Council space. We have every authority, Rebecca replied. The authority of conscience. The authority of answering a cry for help. The authority of being the only species in this chamber willing to stand against the darkness instead of hiding from it. A new voice entered the conversation. Ambassador Thomas Reid, Earth's senior diplomat, stepped out of the shadows at the edge of the chamber. He was 64 years old, calm and measured in every word. The Council has 2 choices, he said. You can authorize humanity's intervention and work with us to defeat the Devourers. Or you can try to stop us. He smiled slightly. I would recommend careful consideration of that second option. The Arbiter studied them both. You are threatening the Galactic Council. We are offering the Galactic Council a partnership, Admiral Cole said. Because the Devourers are real. They are coming. And based on everything we have learned from the Varathi archives, you have absolutely no idea how to stop them. But we do. The chamber fell silent again. For 1,000 years, no species had spoken to the Council this way. For 10,000 years, the old order had maintained its power through secrets and fear. Now a young species from a small planet at the edge of the galaxy was offering to burn it all down. The Arbiter spoke carefully. What do you propose? Admiral Cole looked at Ambassador Reid. Then she looked at the 20,000 delegates watching her with a mixture of horror and something else. Something that might have been hope. We propose the truth, she said. Full disclosure about the Devourers. Full cooperation between all species. And a unified defense against an enemy that has been preying on this galaxy since before most of you were born. She paused. The age of sacrifice is over. The age of hiding is finished. From this moment forward, when someone calls for help, we answer. All of us. Together. Or we all fall alone. The chamber was silent for a very long time. Then, slowly, a single delegate rose. It was Ambassador Velen of the Tessari, a species that had been denied Council protection for 300 years. His voice was quiet but clear. The Tessari stand with humanity. Another delegate rose. Then another. Then 10. Then 100. The old order was cracking. And somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, something ancient felt the change. Something that had never known fear began to understand what it meant. The humans had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. The Council session ended in chaos. 17 species withdrew their delegations immediately. 43 others demanded emergency meetings. The old powers retreated behind closed doors, while the younger civilizations gathered in small groups, whispering about things they had never been allowed to discuss. Admiral Rebecca Cole was escorted to a secure wing of the Council station, where a quantum link connected her to Earth. On the screen before her, Fleet Commander Nathan Blake stood on the bridge of the UE Sovereign, humanity's largest warship, currently holding position above the Varathi homeworld. Report, Cole said. Blake's face was grim. He was 48 years old, built like a mountain, and had commanded humanity's first fleet for 15 years. He had seen things in those years that would break most people. But what he had seen at the Varathi world was different. We arrived in time, he said. Barely. The Devourers had 3 harvesting vessels in the system. They were not killing the Varathi, Admiral. They were collecting them, processing them, stripping their neural tissue and storing it in biological tanks. Cole felt her stomach turn. We destroyed all 3 vessels, Blake continued, but approximately 2 billion Varathi had already been taken. The survivors are requesting asylum on Earth. They have also given us something. A data archive. 4,000 years of hidden history that the Council erased from every public record. The screen filled with ancient documents, battle reports, and extinction notices. Cole studied them carefully. The Devourers have been active for over 100,000 years, Blake explained. They operate on a cycle. They appear every few millennia, target vulnerable species, harvest biological resources, and disappear. The Council's strategy has always been containment. Containment? Cole repeated. They sacrifice the weak species. They keep them deliberately undeveloped. Deny them fleet technology. When the Devourers appear, the Council feeds them the powerless and protects the powerful. Blake's jaw tightened. We were supposed to be next, Admiral. Earth was on their list. In another 300 years, when the Devourers returned, humanity would have been offered up like livestock. Cole closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her expression had hardened into something cold and dangerous. Not anymore, she said. Send me everything. I want full tactical analysis within 6 hours. On the other side of the galaxy, in a place where no light existed, something stirred. The Devourers were not a species. They were a system. A vast network of machines and harvested consciousness, designed by a civilization so old that even their memory had faded into myth. They consumed neural matter because neural matter was power. Every mind they absorbed became part of their processing network. Every species they harvested made them stronger, faster, smarter. For 100,000 years, they had operated without opposition. The galaxy was their garden, and the civilizations within it were their crop. But now something had changed. 3 harvesting vessels had been destroyed. This had never happened before. The data from their final transmissions showed something impossible. A species that fought back. A species with technology that moved faster than anything in the Devourer database. A species that refused to be harvested. In the depths of the dead zone, the central consciousness of the Devourer network processed this new information. It was a mind made from billions of absorbed souls, cold and ancient and utterly without mercy. It had no name because it needed no name. It simply was, and for the first time in millennia, it made a decision. The harvest schedule would accelerate. The new species would be targeted, and this time, the Devourers would not send harvesting vessels. They would send the full fleet, back on Earth. The response was immediate. Secretary General Maria Santos stood before the United Earth Parliament, addressing representatives from every nation on the planet. She was 61 years old, silver-haired, and had led humanity through the first contact crisis 2 decades ago. Now she faced something far worse. We have 48 hours before the Devourer fleet reaches the galactic rim, she said. Our intelligence suggests they are bringing everything. 100,000 vessels. Weapons that have destroyed civilizations since before our sun was born. And they are coming directly for Earth. The chamber fell silent. However, Santos continued, we are not without allies. 67 species have joined our coalition. More are considering. And our fleet is already in position across 500 systems. We are not alone in this fight. General Isaac Monroe rose from his seat. He was 70 years old, pulled from retirement for this crisis, and had spent his entire life preparing humanity for a war that most people never believed would come. Our advantage is speed, he said. Human vessels move faster than anything in the galactic database. Our fold space drives allow us to cross star systems in hours rather than days. The Devourers have never encountered this technology. They do not know how to counter it. He pulled up a tactical display. Our second advantage is decentralization. Council fleets operate on hierarchical command structures. Destroy the flagship, and the fleet collapses. Human vessels operate on distributed networks. Every ship can function independently, coordinate in real time, and adapt without central orders. And our third advantage? Santos asked. Monroe paused. We fight differently. The council species view warfare as a necessary evil. They minimize casualties, accept acceptable losses, and retreat when the cost becomes too high. Humanity does not accept acceptable losses. When we fight to win. Whatever the cost, whatever the sacrifice. He looked around the chamber. The Devourers have harvested species that surrendered, fled, or died quietly. They have never faced a species that would rather burn the galaxy down than kneel. The silence stretched for a long moment, then a voice rose from the back of the chamber. It was Captain Anna Kowalski, a young officer who had volunteered for the Varathi rescue mission. She was 32 years old, and she spoke for millions of soldiers who were preparing to face the darkness. We know the odds, she said. We know what we are facing, but we also know what we are fighting for. Every species that ever called for help and received only silence. Every civilization that was sacrificed so others could survive. Every voice that was ignored by a galaxy that was supposed to protect it. She stepped forward. We are fighting for them. We are fighting to prove that when someone asks for help, someone answers. And we are fighting to show the Devourers that there is one species in this galaxy that will never, ever stop. The chamber erupted in applause not far above the earth. The human fleet was gathering. Thousands of vessels, crewed by volunteers who knew they might not return. Engineers worked around the clock to prepare weapons. Pilots trained in simulators for battles that had never been fought. Scientists studied Devourer technology, searching for weaknesses. And at the heart of it all, Admiral Rebecca Cole stood on the observation deck of the Sovereign, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, the darkness was coming, but for the first time in 100,000 years, the darkness would find something waiting for it, something that refused to be afraid. The first battle happened in a place called the Meridian. System Dot, it was a small colony world with 23 million inhabitants. The Council had already written it off. Evacuation was deemed impossible due to the short notice. The population was expected to be harvested within hours. The Devourers arrived with 47 vessels. Each one was 5 kilometers long, covered in dark metal and pulsing organic tissue. They moved through space like predators, approaching wounded prey. Confident and slow Dot, they expected no resistance. They found Captain David Turner waiting for them. Turner commanded the 7th Expeditionary Squadron, 12 human warships operating on the far edge of Coalition territory. He was 41 years old, calm under pressure, and had never lost a battle in his career. Contact confirmed, his tactical officer reported. 47 Devourer vessels approaching the planet. They are moving into harvesting formation. Turner studied the display. The Devourer ships were massive compared to his squadron. Their weapons had destroyed civilizations. Their armor had never been breached, but they were slow. And they were predictable. Launch the decoys, Turner ordered. All vessels, prepare for close quarters engagement. 12 small drones shot away from the human squadron, broadcasting false signals that mimicked colony transport ships. The Devourer vessels changed course to intercept them, spreading their formation, exactly as Turner had predicted. Now, he said quietly, all ships attack. The human squadron struck from 3 directions at once. Their vessels were smaller, faster, and far more agile than anything the Devourers had encountered. Plasma batteries targeted structural weak points identified in the Varathi archives. Missiles struck propulsion systems. Boarding teams launched toward critical junctions. The Devourers tried to respond. They fired weapons that had destroyed fleets for millennia. But the human ships were not where they expected them to be. They moved too fast, changed direction too quickly, refused to stay in predictable patterns. The battle lasted 53 minutes, When it ended, all 47 Devourer vessels were drifting wreckage. Turner's squadron had lost 4 ships, 218 human lives, but 23 million colonists were still alive across the galaxy. Species that had lived in terror watched the battle recordings in disbelief. The Devourers could be defeated. The ancient enemy was not invincible, and humanity had proved it. The news spread faster than light itself. Coalition species that had been hesitant now pledged their full support. Shipyards on 100 worlds began producing vessels to human specifications. Military officers requested training with human tactics. Scientists shared technology that had been classified for millennia. For the first time in 100,000 years, the galaxy was fighting back. But Admiral Cole knew the truth. Meridian had been a skirmish. The real battle was still coming. She stood in the Coalition war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing fleet positions across 500 systems. Representatives from 87 species filled the chamber, their differences forgotten in the face of a common enemy. The main Devourer fleet will reach the galactic rim in 6 days, Cole announced. Our intelligence indicates they are bringing everything. 112,000 vessels. This is not a harvesting force. This is an extermination fleet. The chamber fell silent. Our combined coalition numbers approximately 35,000 ships, Cole continued. The mathematics are not in our favor. But mathematics are not the only factor in war. She pulled up a new display. It showed something deep in the dead zone, the region of space where the Devourers originated. The Devourers are not truly alive. They are a machine, a system designed by someone for some purpose, eons ago. They operate from a central hub called the Nexus. Every vessel, every harvesting ship, every processing unit is linked to this structure. Destroy it, and the entire system collapses. Ambassador Reed stepped forward. You are proposing a strike at the heart of enemy territory, he said, while their main fleet is heading toward us. Yes, with what forces? If we divert ships from the defensive line, we will be overwhelmed. Cole shook her head. We will not divert defensive forces. We will send a single vessel, the fastest ship in the fleet, crewed by volunteers who understand they will not be coming back. The silence was absolute. A suicide mission, General Monroe said quietly. A victory mission, Cole replied. The only real chance we have. The Coalition fleet holds the line here. We bleed the Devourers for every system. We buy time. And meanwhile, a small team travels to the dead zone and destroys the Nexus from within. She looked around the room. I need 30 volunteers. Pilots, engineers, soldiers, scientists. People willing to give everything so that others might survive. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then a voice came from the back of the room. It was Lieutenant Emma Vance, a young pilot who had flown cargo ships before the war. She was 29 years old, and she had watched her home colony burn when the Devourers attacked. I volunteer, she said. Another voice followed, then another, then 10, then 50. In the end, more than 3,000 humans stepped forward. Cole selected the best 30, the ones with the skills and the courage to attempt the impossible. The mission ship was designated Echo 1. It was built around an experimental fold drive that could cross galaxies in hours instead of weeks. It carried a payload of antimatter warheads powerful enough to crack a planet. Lieutenant Vance would command it. You understand what I am asking? Cole said during the final briefing. Vance nodded. I understand. The odds of survival are essentially 0. I know. Vance looked at her crew. 30 people who had chosen to die so that trillions might live. But someone has to go. Someone has to try. And if we succeed, then every species the Devourers ever harvested will finally have justice. Cole reached out and gripped her shoulder. Make it count, Lieutenant. Vance smiled. We will, Admiral. We will. Echo 1 launched the next morning. It vanished into fold space, heading toward the dead zone, toward the heart of an enemy that had never known defeat. And behind it, the Coalition fleet prepared for the battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy. The Devourers were coming, but this time, they would not find prey waiting for them. They would find something else entirely. They would find humanity. Dead Zone had earned its name. Lieutenant Emma Vance stood on the bridge of Echo 1, watching the displays as they emerged from fold space. Around them stretched an infinite graveyard. Stars that had been drained of energy hung dark and cold. Planets had been stripped to bare rock. The remains of civilizations that had flourished millions of years ago drifted as dust and debris. Nothing alive existed here. Nothing warm. Nothing moving except the distant pulse of the Nexus at the center of this dead galaxy. Scans complete, reported technical specialist Omar Hassan. He was 34, brilliant, and had designed the fold drive that had brought them here. The Nexus is approximately 3 hours away at standard speed. It is a sphere, roughly the size of a small star. The structure is composed of materials we cannot identify. Vance studied the display. The Nexus pulsed with dark energy, tendrils of power connecting it to the corpses of 1,000 worlds. It looked like a heart, she thought. A massive, terrible heart pumping stolen life through an empire of death. Can we destroy it? Theoretically. Hassan pulled up technical data. The core processes the neural matter harvested from every species the Devourers have consumed. Billions of minds integrated into a single network. If we detonate our payload at the core, the chain reaction should destroy the entire structure. Should? There are no guarantees, Lieutenant. No one has ever been this close to the Nexus. No one has ever returned from the dead zone. He paused. But our calculations suggest a 73% probability of success. Vance nodded slowly. 73%. Better odds than she had expected. Take us in, she said. Maximum stealth protocols. Echo 1 moved deeper into the darkness dot at the galactic rim. The siege had begun. The Devourer fleet arrived like a wall of shadows, blotting out the stars. 112,000 vessels, ranging from harvesting ships to massive dreadnoughts that had been dormant for millennia. They emerged from fold space in perfect formation, spreading across a front that covered 3 star systems. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of the Sovereign, watching them come. All vessels hold position, she ordered. Do not fire until they reach the engagement line. The Coalition fleet waited. 35,000 ships from 87 species, arranged in defensive formations designed to maximize their firepower while minimizing exposure. Human vessels held the center. Tessari fighters guarded the flanks. Varathi refugees crewed medical ships behind the lines. Commander Blake moved to stand beside Cole. They outnumber us more than 3-1, he said quietly. I know. If Echo 1 fails, we will not survive this. I know that too. Cole watched the Devourer fleet approach. But we will make them remember us. Whatever happens, the Devourers will know that someone finally stood against them. Someone finally refused to be harvested. The engagement line approached. All vessels, Cole said, her voice carrying across the fleet-wide channel. This is not a battle we expect to win through strength alone. This is a siege. We hold, we bleed them. We buy time for our people to complete their mission. Every hour we survive is a victory. Every enemy ship we destroy is one less threat to the species we protect. She paused. Some of you have asked why humanity fights, why we answer distress calls from strangers, why we refuse to abandon the weak. Her voice hardened. It is simple. We remember what it was like to be alone, to look at the stars and wonder if anyone would come if we called for help. We remember the fear. She straightened. Today, we become the answer to that fear. Today, we become the species that comes when called, whatever the cost. The Devourer fleet crossed the engagement line. All vessels, Cole said. Fire. The battle erupted across 3 star systems. Plasma batteries lit the darkness. Missiles carved trails of fire through the void. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes that outshone the stars themselves. Devourers fought with the cold efficiency of machines. They sacrificed harvesting ships to protect their dreadnoughts. They targeted coalition command vessels. They adapted to human tactics faster than anyone had predicted. But the coalition held. For the first hour, they held. For the second hour, they held. Ships died by the hundreds on both sides, but the defensive line remained intact. On the Sovereign, Admiral Cole coordinated the battle with mechanical precision. She shifted squadrons to reinforce weak points. She ordered retreats when positions became untenable. She watched the casualty reports climb higher and higher. 12,000 coalition ships destroyed. 23,000 Devourer vessels eliminated. They were winning. Barely. But they were winning deep in the dead zone. Echo 1 reached the Nexus. The structure was even more terrifying up close. It pulsed with stolen consciousness, billions of minds absorbed over 100,000 years. Dark energy crackled across its surface like lightning in a storm. I am detecting an entrance point, Hassan reported. An exhaust port on the northern hemisphere. We can reach the outer shell there. Take us in. Vance ordered. Echo 1 descended toward the Nexus. The walls of the structure rose around them like mountains, blocking out the dead stars. Warning lights flashed as unknown energy fields washed over the ship. And then something happened. A voice filled the bridge. It was not human. It was not any voice that had ever existed. It was the voice of billions, speaking in perfect unison. You have come to destroy us. Vance felt ice run through her veins. The Nexus knew they were here. Yes, she said. We have. You cannot succeed. We have existed for 100,000 years. We have consumed galaxies. We are eternal. Nothing is eternal. Vance looked at her crew. 30 faces, pale but determined. 30 people who had chosen to die for something greater than themselves. Everything ends. Even you. The voice was silent for a moment. Why do you fight? You are small, brief, insignificant. Your species has existed for the blink of an eye. Why do you sacrifice yourselves for others? Vance thought about the question. She thought about her home colony, burned to ash. She thought about the Vorathi, screaming for help in the darkness. She thought about every species that had ever been sacrificed to feed the Devourers. Because someone asked for help, she said. And we are the species that answers. She turned to Hassan. Detach the warhead package. Prepare for manual detonation. The crew moved with quiet efficiency. They had trained for this moment. They had accepted what it meant. Echo 1 dove toward the core of the Nexus, carrying enough antimatter to crack a star. And behind them, the Devourer fleet suddenly faltered. Ships that had been pressing the attack slowed. Weapons that had been firing fell silent. On the bridge of the Sovereign, Admiral Cole watched the displays in confusion. What is happening? Unknown, Admiral. The enemy fleet is hesitating, like they are waiting for something. Cole understood. The Nexus knew. It was calling its fleet home, but it was too late. Deep in the dead zone, Emma Vance placed her hand on the detonation switch. For everyone who called for help, she whispered. For everyone who was never answered. She pressed the button. And the darkness screamed. The explosion consumed everything. In the dead zone, where the Nexus had pulsed with stolen consciousness for 100,000 years, a new star was born. Antimatter met matter in a reaction that released more energy than most suns produced in a century. The ancient structure cracked, shattered, and dissolved into fire. And across the galaxy, the Devourer fleet died. Admiral Cole watched it happen from the bridge of the Sovereign. One moment, the enemy vessels were pressing their attack, weapons blazing, driving toward the coalition defensive line. The next moment, they simply stopped. Ships that had been moving at full speed drifted to a halt. Weapon systems went dark. Running lights flickered and died. 112,000 vessels, each one a monument to 100 millennia of horror, became nothing more than floating metal dot. The coalition fleet fell silent. "Confirmed," Commander Blake reported, his voice barely above a whisper. "All enemy vessels are inactive. 0 power signatures. 0 life signs." He paused. "They are gone, Admiral. They are all gone." Cole did not respond. She stood at the viewport, staring at the graveyard of enemy ships stretching across 3 star systems. "Get me Echo 1, she said finally. The communications officer worked for several minutes. Then he shook his head. "No response, Admiral. Echo 1's transponder has gone dark. There is no signal from the dead zone." Cole closed her eyes. 30 volunteers. 30 people who had chosen to give everything so that trillions might survive. Lieutenant Emma Vance, Technical Specialist Omar Hassan, 28 others whose names would be carved into memorial walls across the galaxy. They had succeeded, and they were gone. Slowly, across the coalition fleet, the realization began to spread. Ships that had been preparing for their final moments lowered their weapons. Officers who had accepted death found themselves still breathing. Species that had lived in fear for 100,000 years looked at each other and began to understand. It was over. Devourers were gone. The celebrations lasted for weeks. On 100 worlds, species that had hidden in terror emerged into the light. The Vorathi, the first to be rescued, held ceremonies honoring the humans who had answered their call. The Tessari declared a new calendar, marking the current year as year 1 of the Age of Alliance. The Korathi, who had stood with humanity from the beginning, built monuments that would last for millennia. And on Earth, crowds gathered in every city, every town, every village. They wept, they cheered, they held each other and marveled at the fact that they were still alive. But the work was not finished. 6 months after the battle, the Galactic Council convened in a rebuilt chamber. The old structure, where Admiral Cole had first faced the assembled delegates, had been damaged during the war. The new one was simpler, humbler, designed to reflect a galaxy that had finally learned something about itself. The founding members of the Council were no longer in charge. Their authority had been stripped, their secrets exposed. Now every species sat as equals, from the most ancient to the newest spacefaring civilizations. At the center of the chamber, a memorial had been erected. 30 names inscribed in eternal light, floating above a pedestal of crystal. The crew of Echo 1. Ambassador Thomas Reed delivered the dedication. He was older now, grayer, but his voice remained steady. They were pilots, engineers, soldiers, scientists. They came from a world that most of you had never heard of, a species you dismissed as primitive and reckless. And they gave their lives to save a galaxy that had never shown them kindness. He paused, looking at the assembled delegates. When the distress call came from the Vorathi homeworld, this council chose to look away. You calculated the cost of intervention and decided it was too high. Humanity calculated differently. We heard people dying, and we answered. He turned to face the memorial. That is the difference between us. You counted ships and resources and acceptable losses. We counted people. Every life. Every voice. Every hand reaching out for help. Admiral Rebecca Cole stepped forward to stand beside him. She was wearing her dress uniform, the same simple midnight blue she had worn on that first day in the council chamber. Her face showed the exhaustion of months of war, but her eyes remained clear. "The devourers are gone," she said, "but the lesson remains. The galaxy is only as strong as its willingness to protect the vulnerable. The next time a distress call comes, and there will be a next time, I expect every species in this chamber to answer." She looked around at the delegates. Crystalline beings, gas entities, ancient species who had witnessed the birth of galaxies. This time, none of them looked away. "Because if you do not," she said quietly, "humanity will. And we will remember who stood with us, and who stood aside." The chamber was silent. Then Ambassador Velen of the Tessari rose from his seat. "The Tessari stand with humanity, now and always." Another delegate rose. Then another. Then 10. Then 100, until the entire chamber was standing. Cole nodded slowly. Something had changed, not just in the galaxy, but in the very nature of how civilizations related to each other. The age of secrets was over. The age of sacrifice was finished. Something new was beginning. She thought of Emma Vance, pressing the detonation switch in the heart of the Nexus. She thought of the thousands of human soldiers who had died holding the line. She thought of the Varathi, screaming for help in the darkness, and the moment when humanity had decided to answer. "Then let us get to work," she said. "The galaxy does not protect itself." On a small world at the edge of human space, a child looked up at the stars. She was 6 years old, too young to understand the war that had just ended. But she had heard the stories. She knew about the distress call, and the fleet that had crossed the galaxy in 3 days, and the 30 heroes who had destroyed the ancient enemy. Her mother knelt beside her, pointing at a constellation in the night sky. "That is where they went," she said, "into the darkness, so that we could have the light." The child was quiet for a moment. "Will we always answer?" she asked. "When someone calls for help?" Her mother smiled. "Always. That is who we are. That is who we will always be." The child nodded, satisfied. She did not fully understand, not yet, but she would. One day she would join the fleet. One day she would hear a cry for help from across the stars. One day she would answer, because that was what humanity did. That was what they would always do. Far across the galaxy. In the rebuilt council chamber, the delegates were already planning the future. New treaties, new alliances, new protections for the species that had been abandoned for so long. And at the heart of it all, the memorial to Echo One glowed softly. 30 names inscribed in eternal light. They had answered when called. They had given everything so that others might live, and the galaxy would never forget.